In compliance with the Open Meetings Act, a current copy of the act is available at this meeting. Madam Clerk, will you call roll, please?
Augustine Schulte.
Here?
Barr.
Here.
Hemer.
Here.
Jablonski.
Here.
Lohr.
Here.
Lopez.
Here.
Roth.
Here.
Schilling.
Yes.
Council President Augustine Schulte, the roll has been called.
Thank you. We have one item on our agenda, a presentation by RDG Planning and Design on the Downtown Revitalization Plan. But I don't think our presenters are here this evening.
They're not here yet.
They're not
They
here
left
yet.
at like 4:15, so.
Hopefully they're
Not here.
That's the travel, the weather.
So we will just leave the meeting open and continue with the presentation when they arrive. Is that,
Yeah, I mean, we can, I'm trying to open it. My internet keeps disconnecting. I can,
Do you want us to display the slides?
sure, yeah, let's open it and,
do you have enough information, Tara, to do any kind of to kind of explain anything until they get here? Or,
Jean and I are gonna shoot from the hip. Okay?
all right,
Cut us some
go
slack.
for it.
And then if we get out of it, we'll just hit escape and it'll make it.
Certainly don't wanna waste anybody's time.
Were you the one that fell?
Let's advance to slide,
Want a hard copy?
It's no longer ARL.
It's 2 packs, but
We sold it, it's ARL. This is Inc., but it's doing business as Columbus.
we're just gonna,
We have too much.
Tag
legal.
team, maybe?
yep, ping pong this presentation that we did not prepare.
But Tara, do we have
Yes.
to have an introduction of people who are presenting here?
I'm Tara Vosacek, I'm the city administrator.
I'm Jean Van Ypern, I'm the Planning and Economic Development Coordinator.
So for the downtown revitalization plan,
Don't look so
we
nervous,
Oh,
Jean.
there she is.
Yay! We contracted with RDG to do a downtown revitalization plan. It started back in April, and Amy Hawsey is here with RDG and will give a presentation here. So Jean and I don't have to give her presentation. We're glad you're safe, though. I was a little confused. Yes, you can use my computer if you want, Amy. If you want to use this, you certainly can.
Better catch your breath.
I know, right?
That's okay. Thanks. Sorry, everyone. I even left early, but it was not great getting out of Omaha. Well, thank you, everyone. Glad to be here. Glad to see a lot of familiar faces again. We'll go through these, answer any questions that you have. You're actually probably okay if you want to go back to that. So just to, it sounded like you guys kind of stepped through the process already. Okay, go ahead. Or can I advance them?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
Is there a way for?
I'm not connected.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Oh, okay, then no, okay.
Yeah, just tell me.
Yep, go ahead. That's the next one. All right, so tonight we just wanted to share a little bit about what we found within the study, some of the findings, and then answer any questions that you potentially have. I'm not going to go into the weeds of the first few chapters that go into the data and all that, but happy to answer any questions if you do have from that section. But go ahead. So first, we break this down into kind of two, what we call functional and physical, both framework, and then starting with that, some of the issues and opportunities that were identified through the planning process and the conversations that we had with folks. And I think on the functional side, two of the key issues that we were hearing from a lot of folks were, how do we kind of balance some of the changes and at the same time trying to stay relevant? And in that sense, what we're kind of referring to there is, how do we respect history, respect the memories folks have of the district and destinations and places and how things have functioned, with how do we continue to make sure that the district also remains relevant to the next generation and their memories that they have that might be a little bit different or evolving with their new families and so forth. Also, we heard a lot of things are actually around organizational structure. Who's kind of helping keep the district organized, a central brand, all of those things, kind of some confusion actually, I think there, and so just potential improvements that could happen on that side. On the functional opportunity pieces, we heard a lot of great things about the existing events, from lawn chairs to Columbus Days to all of these events that happen within the district that are really great opportunities. I will point out when we talk about events, and this was actually something I learned a few years back with working with the organization that does events like the Farmers Market in Omaha and the Summer Arts Festival and so forth. And they really emphasize when we think about events in a district like this, we need to be thinking about them in the sense of how do we bring people in to set the stage for them to come back and enjoy the district in other ways, to come back to use the restaurants, to come back to use the stores. And they said a lot of times when people are coming for an event, they're coming for that event. You might not necessarily get a lot of retail business off of that particular event, but we want to put like the best foot forward we can. So they go, wow, I saw this neat little store, or I saw this restaurant, and next weekend, let's come back and check that out. I thought that was really kind of good advice and in a good way to think about that. And so that was a little bit about how we thought about opportunities as it relates to events for the downtown. Connectivity was also kind of an important opportunity that we have. Our two major highways kind of skirt don't go through the district. So it's really easy to kind of pass through if you're a visitor and not realize what's maybe happening here in the downtown. So how do we improve those connections? How do we improve connections from kind of the 13th Street area down to the 11th Street area? All of those pieces too. So kind of at both the micro and the macro level within and getting to the district. And then your new community building that's going up. I've said it a couple times in some of the meetings. I mean, I think you guys are setting the bar pretty high for other communities in Nebraska and what you're doing there and really setting the standard. And I think that'll be a great opportunity to build from and some of the things that are happening there. Go ahead. On the physical side, some of the issues that we heard, the streetscape. And there were things such as we have areas where the sidewalks and curbs are in good condition, and then we have other areas where they're not in such great condition, and there's some deterioration going on. We also heard, it was really interesting because it was more than one group talked about the fact that there just isn't a lot of color. There's some concrete, but there isn't much color, and this interest in having that a little bit more in the area. Parking. That there's actually, when we look at the number of stalls, we have enough parking, but using that parking and getting to that parking isn't always the experience that people want to have. So how can we potentially be improving the parking lots and then getting to the parking so that it's a better experience? Frankfurt Square, you will see, is as both an issue and an opportunity. Overall, we did hear people view that as a real gem and asset within the downtown. But they also said, we feel like there's some small improvements, some things that can be done that will help it function better, that will make it better for current events that we have today and for future events that we would like to hold, and just making it better to use on a kind of day-to-day basis for folks who work here in the district and so forth. A sense of place, that we heard this opportunity for, that we don't really have. We talked a little bit about the branding, that there's sense that there wasn't this kind of cohesive branding for the overall district, but also this growing opportunity to kind of have almost maybe a little bit of a tweak on that between the kind of the Frankfurt Square area and the 11th Street corridor too. Facades, that we've made some good progress on some of the facades and facade improvement grants, but there were still some major buildings and even almost whole blocks where there could be potential for additional facade improvement happening. On the opportunity side, I talked a little bit about Frankfurt Square already. There's also a lot of opportunity for additional housing, additional upper story housing. We have a number of buildings in the downtown that have the ability to add housing or to improve the housing. And really across Nebraska now, there's a really great kind of plethora of examples that we can look to from other communities with some trends happening there and showing the market viability. And I think what's most important there is showing the types of rents that you need to get for those products to work. We also then heard about lots of opportunities on the 11th Street corridor. When we think about where that district was, that area was when the previous study was done and where it's at today with some of the new businesses and just kind of the energy coming from the restaurants and so forth there, a real excitement around could we kind of create this entertainment area, maybe a little bit more adult entertainment area, where Frankfurt Square is maybe a little bit more the family-friendly sort of entertainment area. So that was some interesting opportunities and conversations we heard from folks. Okay, so I'm going to drill down into this because this is pretty hard to read here up on the screen, but we kind of tried to take some of those and begin to kind of physically lay those out, what those could begin to look like in the physical realm of the community. So you can go ahead and go to the next. Thanks. So starting with the functional side, we kind of identified 3 areas: easy to find, easy to navigate, branding and arts, and coordination. So you can go ahead and go to the next one. So on easy to find, easy to navigate. So some of those functional opportunities that we had, starting with developing some wayfinding signage to direct visitors both to the downtown and then once you're in the district around. So, you know, if you're in the Frankfurt Square area, letting folks know what's along 11th Street and where some kind of our key destination businesses are around the district. Continuing on the easy to find, easy to navigate, improving the function of those existing parking lots. So identifying those lots, adding some kind of green space and buffering, making them feel a little bit more comfortable. I could park my car and it could be in the shade in the summer and potentially, and I'm not going to be, you know, feeling like I'm being baked. But also that then is adding some of that color. And then we'll talk a little bit more, but as we talk about the alleyways here later, but also then improving the connections and making those feel like they're closer to the business that you're trying to go to, because the walk is kind of fun and pleasant to experience to have. Also completing a traffic study to begin to determine appropriate improvements on traffic congestion. So we clearly heard pros and cons on both sides of this. People feel very passionate about how we can improve traffic circulation. So one of the things we said is probably just the next step is to take a closer look at this, because we heard things about, you know, we see so many districts switching from the one ways to the two ways. It is a trend we're seeing in most cities anymore. We also have seen a lot of places where we're taking down the stoplights and putting in the stop signs. So we were actually involved in some of those things, like on South 24th Street, where you get a huge amount of traffic, and they actually found that it improved the quality for the pedestrians because people stop and then they move on. They don't try to speed up for that stoplight, but go ahead. So some of the things that have found kind of in national research on safety side, you have things like it just creates a better environment for pedestrians because people tend to slow down. They're going to slow down more when they see an oncoming cars. They're going to slow down to avoid and give them a little bit more reaction time. So those are some of the benefits. And also, we did hear from a number of folks. It actually kind of made me chuckle because I heard a little bit of like, well, we're just kind of used to it. But then in the same conversation, they were started telling stories of how many people they see a day going the wrong way down the one-way streets. So I was like, well, not everybody's used to it then. It can shorten the travel distance for the motorist potentially, and it allows better visibility of our businesses because we're just driving a little bit slower. And I think if you're familiar with the Farnham Street area in the Blackstone area, they converted that from one-way to two-way, and that was a big thing. Is it just really slowed down that traffic and allowed people to actually see the businesses that were in that area, and it's been a big part of kind of the redevelopment of that area. Continuing on now with branding and art and the arts. So Here we want to think about how can we begin to establish a brand for the entire district that's unique, but maybe also potentially has a little bit of a twist that highlights the distinction between kind of the 11th Street and that 13th, 14th Frankfurt Square business district. So there's a little bit of that twist in there. And I think it was really interesting in kind of putting these slides together. I started thinking and looking at some of our other kind of peer cities, the Norfolks, the Grand Islands, the Hastings, and so forth, to see kind of what they were doing. So we have a few of those splashes in here to kind of give you that sense a little bit. Expanding on opportunities for arts. So in the district, we heard one was just the color, potentially adding color in kind of subtle ways, but also we heard about some of the fun things that have happened maybe with different art initiatives. I think with what's going to be happening at the new community center, community building, will be a pretty great opportunity to engage the art community a little bit more in the district too. And people they like to know that there's potentially some variety or things that they can go and check out, and then it might change from time to time. On the coordination piece, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but again, that idea of having probably a unified organization that that can assist our businesses, that can market the district, that can coordinate events and things that are happening, even just down to just as simple things as, the website that we go to look at to check out the businesses that are here or the events that are happening within the district. So making sure that's kind of coordinated and in one voice, and really thinking about it in the sense of almost like the whole district being a business, and how do we look against our competitors too. On the coordination piece then too, a lot of these districts also have instituted business improvement districts. So these are a way for them to kind of fund maintenance efforts, but also help with some of that marketing. It's how, we talk about the parking lots and the parking lot improvements. That's actually how Norfolk does all of their parking lot improvements. They've used the BID to help do all of that work for them. And it's a way to just kind of, again, create that uniformed organization, and takes a lot of the, hopefully, effort off of maybe one individual business having to do some of those things. Next is our physical framework, and here we're looking at enhanced building appearance, comfortable and engaging pedestrian environments, and then kind of our premier event space. So on enhanced building appearances, great facade improvement program has really been used, so we need to continue to maybe make sure that stays in place, continuing to look at how can we enhance that existing program to just make it even better than it is, and maybe even some additional funding for that potentially. Comfortable and engaging pedestrian environment being a big part of this. So one of the things that we heard was this, I think this image on the right is a great example of kind of trying to achieve two different things here. One is, how can we make that distance for the pedestrian a little bit shorter and a little bit more comfortable crossing for them, slow down that traffic a little bit, or at least make them feel like they're visible to the traffic when they're kind of stepping out. But one of the things so a lot of times we would say, let's do curb extensions and bump outs. But we understand that the curbs around the square are not that old. They were replaced not too long ago. So we said, let's, I think actually this is probably an idea Jean shared from something she had seen, and said, let's extend those, and we'll extend those curbs, but we're extending them a little bit more kind of virtually, and that is using kind of art and color in that place. Again, it creates a visual cue to the driver that there's something there that I should slow down for. And it's also then going to get them, that pedestrian, again, out there so that they can see better, have better visual of the traffic and the traffic of them. And it adds some color, it adds the art piece that we had talked about. So it just adds some fun to the district.
Oops, sorry.
That's good. Also in this gets into some of the streetscape pieces then too. As we mentioned, we heard from a lot of folks, how can we add color? There was a lot of folks who were like, we want some more trees. The few people who said, I want a tree right in front of my business or right in front of, on the corners. Usually on those sorts of planting opportunities, we tried to be pretty strategic in that, think about where we could do that. Ultimately, and you'll see this in the 11th Street corridor, that's usually a great place to kind of put some of those planting is in the corner nodes. But again, since that's probably a little bit further down the road in this area here, because we don't want to be moving things we've already done recently. We looked at some of the mid-block areas and how we could just incorporate that into the existing kind of sidewalk area by adding some shade, by adding some color into those areas. And this is a great example of where the BID can be really helpful of that, of making sure, you know, anything that you plant is being watered and taken care of, and the business that's in front of there knows, you know, it's almost like thinking about it like a homeowners association, where you're gonna have your snow removed and those sorts of things. It's kind of that same idea that you know that stuff is all going to be maintained and taken care of. We talked about the connections to the different parking areas, and really the alleys are a key way to be able to do that. And so we looked at some ways that we could improve those alleys and connect that to the art. And so we started referring to them as galleyways. So it's kind of this gallery, this kind of art gallery experience that you can have in the alley, that you can walk down that alley and maybe see something that unexpected. There's great examples from all over the country. You know, we here in these illustrations, we're showing something that's probably kind of more murals. You'll see things that is more kind of free flowing, where people can come and add, or, you know, chalk walls or whatever it might be. But it allows folks to walk through a space that feels kind of comfortable and maintained, because that's a really important part for that pedestrian to feel safe in a space, is that someone is paying attention to this, it's cared for, and it's something as simple as adding some artwork and maybe some additional lighting, and all of a sudden it feels like a space that I'm meant to be in. And it easily connects me quickly to the parking lot and the businesses then that are on the streets adjoining it. Our premier event space. So Frankfurt Square is our premier event space. It really is not about kind of a total facelift or shutting down the park to do major improvements. That is not what the idea was here. It was more about kind of strategic improvements, creating spots where we can have vendors that can set up easier during events like Columbus Days, or we could just be able to have easier access for food trucks during the week or on a weeknight during events. How we can maybe make it a little bit better space too for like things like lawn chair. Adding some other family features. There's maybe, you know, potentially a water feature that's actually activated by, it only runs if somebody comes up and pushes the button on it, so that kids can come down and kind of families can come and use the park, use the space during the week for things that are outside kind of structured event time. And then just creating kind of better seating areas for folks who work here in the district who want to take their lunch outside or read a book during lunch, that the seating areas are a little bit better in that sense too. And so again, and I will say, somebody I think asked at one of the meeting about trees, and one of the things we said is really that wouldn't really change too much other than going through, we did see that there's probably needs to be some kind of targeted removal probably of a few of our older trees, just purely for safety reasons. Nothing that serious, but just, and then replacement of those trees. So it's just kind of routine maintenance things on trees rather than needing to do anything significant there to the canopy. The premier event space also should trickle down to the 11th Street side. So in this area, we thought there was a couple of key kind of exciting opportunities. We talk a little bit about the streetscape piece and the opportunity. Here's where we have it done, that sidewalk and curb improvements. So this is where we could really kind of almost do kind of a test run for the district to see, to show how those kind of curb extensions could work, to demonstrate to folks that, you know, it doesn't remove any, we're not losing any parking. Actually, in this scheme, we actually end up picking up some parking, that we're not losing parking, that it can slow traffic and just creates a nice place for where we could put some of that color, some of the trees and so forth. We do, as I mentioned, this gives us also an opportunity to potentially close off a portion of the street. So if we were thinking about places where we wanted to have like a street dance, this might be that location to do those sorts of events, and have that where we could close off an intersection or close off a block or so of the 11th Street area and do those types of events. We also have an illustration here, as you can see on the north side, where we can actually add some parking, and all that really is about kind of striping and creating some structure. It's there. We don't have to even move curbs or do anything like that. It's just adding some more structure and striping to the area, and we could pick up some parking. So all of those things kind of adding to the appeal of that district, and again, kind of mixing in some maintenance with some potential improvements that we could be doing in the area. We are also really excited, as we mentioned, about that idea that for additional housing. So permanent residents add, you know, kind of life and vitality to the district 24/7. That's especially beneficial for some of our businesses like restaurants and so forth, who aren't necessarily just dependent on kind of a lunchtime crowd or a Friday, Saturday, you know, folks going out for the weekend sort of crowd, but they get more people living in the downtown. It also really just increases the value of our downtown properties. We also realize, though, that, anyway, at least I've always said over the years that, you know, it's really easy as a building owner, and if I have my insurance business in the lower level, I know the insurance business, I know how to run that, but I don't know what it means to do a rehab on a residential or to manage a property up above. But there's so many resources out right now that those folks can tap into. And that's, again, we talk about how can we maybe improve organizational structure. That'd be a great initiative right there for kind of a unified organization for the downtown to be doing, of bringing in kind of subject matter experts to talk about, this is how we did it, this is what you need to be thinking about, or maybe even talking about how do we create kind of a joint management. You know, I don't think I want to be a landlord, but if someone wants to help me manage those rental properties up there, I'm happy to do that. Or I'd really like to move to the space above my home, but I've never gone through a rehab project like that. What does that mean and what's that look like? So it's about putting a lot of those tools in place for those folks to help them out. So happy to answer. I think my next slide is questions, right? Happy to answer any questions. Hopefully I didn't go too fast. I forgot to double check how much time you wanted me to take. But happy to answer any questions on what I went over, but also any other parts of the document that I didn't touch on.
What's the next step?
Next steps, that's probably, maybe I'll pass that a little bit to Tara and Jean. But, you know, I think it's probably is prioritizing out of this, what are some of the first strategies that we want to take on, and then moving from there.
Yeah, Jean and I have already been talking about what are the quick, easy wins, and also we put $125,000 in the budget for downtown improvements to start chipping away at this. So we're talking about what we can, most fruitful things we can do with that capital investment that we have in the budget that will really make an impact on downtown activities and events and that destination quality that we keep hearing people want. And then we put the money in the budget for some picnic tables. We put money in the budget for a new sound system on the bandstand. So that's kind of what we were thinking, is that Frankfurt Square is going to be the first infrastructure improvement. But then also Jean has been working diligently on getting the downtown business improvement district moving forward. So we've had 2-3 meetings with the Downtown Business Improvement District Board. We're trying to set another one for early in the year. We have a draft ordinance to create a Downtown Business Improvement District. So those are the first two major steps forward. But then obviously the reason we wanted to update this plan is because we want it to be a living document that we actually work on every year, because that document that was completed back in, I think it was 2012, unfortunately not a lot of that came to life. And that is not what we want this document to be. We really want to bring all of this to life, because I think our community building is really igniting a fire in downtown. I'm already seeing it, in other buildings. I'm getting lots of questions. There seems like there's an uptick in interest in downtown. So the more we can keep that ball rolling, the bigger it will get and the faster those things will get done. So we'll apply for another round of DTR funds to get that facade stuff going just as soon as we can. So those are the big steps forward.
Yeah, and one of the things too I'll say is at the very end, we kind of have it summarized a little bit in kind of a implementation page. And we've definitely seen communities, and we encourage this on kind of an annual basis, where as you're doing your kind of strategic planning for the next year or budgeting for the next year, to kind of look at this and say, one, first of all, what did we accomplish and what should we celebrate? And then two, what on here do we want to maybe try to tick off? Or as Tara said, is a living document. What did we accomplish that maybe tweaks one of these other things that we have here a little bit, and maybe, or, we had a new business come into this building, and so it really kind of maybe changed the momentum for plantings in front of, along that block, whatever it might be. And so just making those kind of adjustments and realizing what you want to kind of bite off for the next year.
Have you been working with the people that are doing the study for the viaduct and the overpass?
Yes, we did chat with them a little bit too. And so one of the things that we do encourage in here is that whatever kind of conclusion, we were very specific that we didn't really want to show a specific alternative, because we knew that was still being evaluated. But ultimately, one of the things that we try to encourage in here is that whatever the final decision is how are we improving the experience of especially the pedestrians, that we can maybe park once in this district and move back and forth between both areas. And so that being really important, and how do we continue to kind of showcase our businesses and create that connectivity. So we really focus probably a little bit more on that pedestrian experience and making sure we're not losing that in kind of whatever the final decision is made there.
You mentioned in several of your situations here, bringing color to things, whether it was parking lots or anything like that. Have you ever used artificial turf?
Yes, we have used that in a few different places. Probably the best example that I always think about, and folks like Carrie, who you probably met at some of our other workshops, he could probably give off even more examples. He's our landscape architect. But the one that I often think about is in Mason City, Iowa. So fairly similar sized community. They actually, I don't know what it would have been, probably the 60s. They put a big mall in their downtown and dead-ended a street into it. And it has all these historic buildings, including a historic Frank Lloyd Wright hotel that line up going to this entrance. And so a few years ago, redid that plaza completely. And one of the things that they did in there was artificial turf, just because of and we're seeing that used more and more. One, a little bit to deal with drainage issues. So, water can kind of quickly drain from those areas, and then just wear and tear. Because in high traffic areas where you're holding a lot of events, sometimes it's really hard to maintain that turf. And so we're seeing that. I saw that some nice examples of that in Carmel, Indiana, just this last spring too, where they even noted that they started off using grass turf and switched to the artificial because it was such a high traffic area. We're seeing it used in some downtowns that are getting a lot of residential are also looking for places for dogs. And so that's something they'll do, is they'll actually use the artificial turf in the areas for dogs, because it's, again, high traffic and wear and tear, and then it's kind of easier to clean up.
How do you clean artificial turf or freshen it up, so to speak?
It's, that again would probably be more of a Carrie question, but I think it's just, you know, if you're not getting enough rains, it's just kind of probably hosing it down then.
Hosing and brush.
What?
Hosing and a brush.
Hosing in a brush.
Heavy broom.
I just think it's, to plant grass is an exercise in futility.
In some places it is.
You can't irrigate it on a regular basis. The sun just beats the heck out of it because of the hot concrete everywhere around it. And although I don't like artificial turf, I think it may be an alternative we should look at.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, like I said, it's in those places where we're seeing, especially a lot of traffic, and if it doesn't get the shade, and you know, it also goes to you know, the amount of irrigation that you want to put in and spend on too. So yeah.
Thank you.
All right, if there are no other questions, thank you so much for racing to get here and traveling in the weather.
I wasn't racing.
Okay, oh, that's good. But we do appreciate your travel efforts to get here, and
Yeah, no
thank you for
problem.
your presentation.
Yeah.
And if there's no more questions, then we are going to go ahead and adjourn our meeting so that we can start the council meeting.
Okay.
Thank you again for your